Hey folks, this video is going to be a little bit off topic, so if you're just here for the goat stuff, you can maybe skip this video. But if you want to engage in a thought experiment and a discussion on this topic, stick with me here. I also get just a little bit political at the end, so that'll be fun. So a little bit of background on myself, and I'm bringing these things up to point out that I am not trying to say that any of these things make me an expert, because I'm going to say the exact opposite. Yes, I'm a drone pilot. Yes, I grew up on a ranch and had a horse. Yes, I was in the infantry over a decade ago in a very different type of war, and I was an average soldier at best. The point of bringing that up there is I'm not trying to use any of those to say that I have some expertise in this topic. I just want to get that out of the way up front. So the next thing we'll talk about is kind of the state of modern large-scale combat operations as they exist today in the Donbass, in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And the short answer is it's a drone war. Most of the reconnaissance surveillance is done with drones, and most of the killing is done with drones. Terminal attack drones, FPV drones, camera facing forward, they carry a payload. A reconnaissance drone will spot a target. They'll send out an FPV drone. A pilot with goggles on his face will pilot that FPV drone into that target. Could be a dugout, could be a bunker, could be just a piece of abandoned equipment, could be a vehicle driving down the road, could be an individual soldier. It's used for all of those things, and it is by far the biggest effector on the battlefield by any measure. And that's the current state of the war in the Donbass. So, why does that matter? Well, a couple of years ago, you started to see this prevalence of Russian troops no longer using armored vehicles for attempting to advance and switching to using motorcycles and UTVs and ATVs and even like golf carts and stuff like that. And there was, in the Western information space, there was a whole bunch of hooting and hollering about this. Look how desperate the Russians are. They can't even provide their troops with proper armored protection. And then the Ukrainians started copying it. And then the U.S. Department of Defense at the time, Department of War now, started copying it. And you start to see contracts canceled for these large armored vehicles and more contracts being fielded for these lighter armored vehicles, or completely unarmored vehicles, excuse me. And when you look at the survivability and the effectiveness on the battlefield of troops attempting to advance in the age of drone warfare, lighter and faster and more nimble is the way to go, and less logistically intensive. An armored vehicle has a huge audio signature, has a huge visual signature, has a huge thermal signature. It is incredibly logistically intensive. Those things suck fuel and suck parts too. Compared to like an off-the-shelf Chinese ATV, UTV, like the Russians still are typically using, much cheaper, much simpler logistically. If it breaks, okay, throw it in the trash and get a new one, kind of thing. That's that cheap. Much more nimble in practical reality on the battlefield, and despite the propaganda videos of tanks running through the mud and whatever. The practical reality on the battlefield is that the motorcycles and UTVs and ATVs are far more nimbler and far better at evading drones. They also provide far better visibility, so if you have somebody riding with you and they have a shotgun, they have a fighting chance of at least knocking out a drone before it gets you. And it's just funny to me how it went from just all this derision about Russia to, and even at the time I thought that, this makes sense if you think about it. Like, so what about horses? Well, you're seeing the same thing on the Western side of the information space. That the horses are, oh, look how desperate Russia is. They can't even supply their troops with motorcycles anymore. Well, let's think about this for a minute. And we'll compare horses to both motorcycles and armored vehicles. Thermal signature. Which one's going to be lower, a horse, a motorcycle, or an armored vehicle? A horse is going to be the lowest, by far. Yeah, a motorcycle is physically smaller, but it's, the temperature of the internal combustion engine, I don't know what it is, but I guarantee you it's much higher than the body temperature of a horse. And that's as warm as that horse is going to show up on thermals. Audio signature. Yeah, I'm going to say a horse is the quietest among those three by a pretty wide margin. Visual signature, this is where it gets a little murky. Definitely lower visual signature than an armored vehicle. Probably in the same neighborhood as a UTV. maybe arguably a little bit higher than a motorcycle, but keep in mind that a motorcycle is definitely something that's going to attract a lot of attention on the battlefield. A horse is something that probably already exists on the battlefield sometimes anyway, just incidentally, just like there's probably dogs and cats and sheep and goats and cattle on the battlefield sometimes because they weren't evacuated, so they're still just there. Then there's the logistics side of things. Yeah, UTV or ATV is significantly less logistically intensive than any armored vehicle is going to be. Horse is even less logistically intensive than that, I would argue. A horse can subsist for a while. I'm not a horse expert, but a horse can subsist for a while on just stuff it finds in the environment, I'm sure. I don't know how long, and it depends on, how healthy you're trying to keep that horse. But the simple fact is that a horse doesn't require fuel. You can ride it into an area and ride it back out, and you don't have to wait for a fuel delivery in between. Another aspect with the horse logistics, and this has been a common theme throughout warfare if you've studied it, is that horse is also an emergency food supply if you need to. And if you've seen, the amount of interdiction of first-person view drones taking out logistics trucks or even just individual troops trying to carry boxes of stuff or whatever, and how often battlefield advances are made simply by severing the logistics and forcing that unit to withdraw under pressure because they can't feed themselves. They can't get ammo to their troops anymore, so they have to pull back to a more defensible position. And it's not because they were directly attacked, it's because the logistics were attacked. So there's definitely some points to consider there. And then there's the last one. This is the fun one. A tank or an armored vehicle is not actually going to be all that mobile on the battlefield. It's fairly slow, it's fairly lumbering, especially when you're piling all kinds of extra crap on it, electronic warfare and extra cage armor and whatnot, trying to keep FPV drones away. A UTV or ATV is definitely going to be a lot more mobile than that. But a UTV or ATV or a motorcycle, you can only turn so fast. You turn too fast, you're going to roll. You can only speed up or slow down so much in terms of evading a drone. That's what we're talking about here. Drone pilots are already very adept at targeting vehicles. They know the optimal approach angles to use to target a particular vehicle in a particular situation because vehicles can only do so much in terms of evasion. And horses are not, infinite direction capable. They can't turn on a dime at 100 miles an hour or something like ridiculous like that. But horses are definitely more mobile. They can definitely cross rougher terrain. They can go places where vehicles just can't. So you might see attacks coming from angles and directions that you wouldn't expect it to come from because you're thinking, well, that's completely impassable. But, well, maybe not if you're on a horse. If you're attempting to evade a drone, a horse can turn a lot sharper. A horse can speed up or slow down a lot faster. In my opinion, a lot faster and a lot more nimbly than a ATV or UTV or motorcycle. So as far as direct evasion goes, another thing to consider is autonomy. If a drone's coming after you and you want to grab a small arm, a shotgun, whatever, to try to take out that drone, you can drop the reins on that horse and you can do that. If you're on a motorcycle and you let go and try to grab your rifle while you're moving to engage a drone, you're probably not going to be on that motorcycle very long, and you're probably not going to get that drone either. So there is a certain amount of autonomy there where the horse can still avoid obstacles, it can still cover rough terrain without you having to sit there and micromanage it like you would have to if you're driving a vehicle. So yeah, that's about it. That's about all of my thesis. What we're attempting to do here, I'm going to try to avoid getting too political, but what I'm attempting to do here is demonstrate a thought experiment where we look at the proverbial other and we give them kind of the benefit of the doubt. We assume that our most negative assumptions about them must be false. These people must not be stupid or evil or desperate. That instead they are making rational decisions based on the information that they have and their particular set of values and worldviews. I would encourage you in this time of high political discourse, partisanship, whatever word you want to use for it, whichever side of whatever issue that you're on, to do the same to the other side. to throw out your assumptions that, oh, they're stupid, they're evil, they're lazy, whatever it is, and accept that maybe there are other explanations for their beliefs and their behaviors. So that's all I wanted to say about that. If you like this video, give it a like. I wouldn't bother subscribing, though. I'm probably not going to make a video like this ever again. But there you go.